Thank you. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting regarding our budget. And I want to acknowledge that we're having this meeting at traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Qualicum First Nation. And I'm going to start by saying, you know, we just saw this for the first time as council this morning too. So it's a lot of new stuff for us as well, but we'll work our way through it together with the guidance of our financial administrator. And we'll try to come up with some good answers and questions and hopefully make good decisions at the end. Thank you, Mr. Hare, for preparing all this. And I'm just going to go through the formality of adopting the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Then the agenda is adopted by consent. Budget. Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have a PowerPoint presentation for the public information session today. So today is the first of, there we go. Today is the first of two public information sessions on the 2026 to 2030 financial plan, and there will be an opportunity for the public to ask questions at the end of the presentation. No decisions are being requested today, so today's presentation is for the benefit of Council's early consideration of the public engagement on the capital budget. In an ideal situation, the meeting agenda would have been accompanied by advanced handout materials and a formal staff report to allow for a review ahead of time, as you had mentioned. However, this year, due to staff capacity being significantly constrained, due to the additional workload associated with major initiatives, including the Eagle Crest Golf Course acquisition and work related to the Qualicum Commons, we've been working up against tight timelines and we're not able to finalize and distribute materials in advance of today's meeting. To address this, staff have prepared a comprehensive PowerPoint presentation for today's session, which is intended to clearly walk through the information, provide context, and support informed discussion. Printed materials and supporting documents will also be made available as the budget process continues. We appreciate both councils and the public's understanding and remain committed to transparency and meaningful engagement throughout the remainder of the budget process. Handout materials of today's presentation are available for those who wish to follow along, as some of the information presented on the screen might be difficult to read. We do have 71 slides to go through today, and the slides are numbered, so I would request that questions be saved to the end of the presentation. And in terms of further engagement, the next engagement session will be held on January 28th, followed by council deliberation of the financial plan at first and second readings, scheduled for February 25th. And staff will incorporate council direction provided at the February 25th meeting and bring back a draft financial plan for third reading on March 25th, with adoption of the financial plan planned for April 1st. So the financial plan is comprised of the operating and capital budgets. The capital budget focuses on the renewal and replacement of existing assets and investment in new assets. These expenditures are typically funded from available funds and reserves, contemplated grant opportunities, developer contributions, and borrowing. The operating budget focuses on the day-to-day operating costs of running the town and typically includes revenues such as taxation revenue, fees and charges, lease revenues, etc., and expenditures such as salaries and wages, maintenance costs, supplies and materials, insurance and professional services, and transfers to reserves, just to name a few. Today's focus and public information session will be focused on the proposed draft 2026 to 2030 capital budget. So here's a brief overview of today's agenda. We'll begin with a high-level overview of the town's asset management framework, including a brief discussion of asset reserves and asset replacement planning. We'll then review the town's capital replacement needs and funding available to address those requirements. Next, we'll walk through proposed projects for the replacement of existing assets that are at or nearing the end of their useful service life, with a focus on projects planned for 2026. Finally, we'll be reviewing projects proposed for inclusion in the 2026 to 30 financial plan that represent new investment in municipal assets. So this is a slide that Council has seen many times over the past 3 years and is included as a reminder of Council's confirmed commitment to a systematic approach towards service, asset, and financial sustainability, one that is incremental, measured, and tailored to the town's needs and organizational capacity. Asset management is a structured process that helps keep track and good care of the town's assets, which are comprised of buildings, roads, equipment, parks and trails assets, culverts, water, and sewer infrastructure. It ensures that these things last longer, work well, and are cost-effective so that the community can enjoy quality services and infrastructure. The town owns in excess of $228 million in assets. Assets are used to provide services that residents need and enjoy. The largest component of assets is comprised of transportation-related assets such as roads, sidewalks, trails, and buildings, and water and sewer assets. The challenge facing the community is that the town's capital infrastructure replacement obligation has grown at a much faster pace than the town's annual contribution to reserves to address asset life cycle costs, indicating an asset replacement infrastructure gap. This means that the town is currently not putting enough money away in reserves to address the maintenance and renewal of assets. The consequence of this is that as the town's assets age, we're not replacing assets when required, which results in a higher risk of failure and risk of disruption in services. This will also put the town in a position of being at higher risk of requiring emergency repairs, resulting in expensive and overall higher life cycle costs. This is a challenge that is not unique to Qualicum Beach and is one faced by communities across the country. So Council allocates resources for capital infrastructure and asset management priorities through its annual budget process and must make decisions on how limited funding is allocated across competing infrastructure needs. So capital infrastructure costs are largely funded from asset reserves. In the case of the general fund, a portion of property taxation is allocated to the asset replacement reserve every year. The reserve balance is then drawn on to address the infrastructure replacement costs. Replacement requirements can vary significantly from year to year. Therefore, the reserve method of supporting asset life cycle costs supports financial stability and avoids large fluctuations in property taxation from year to year. In 2023, Council established a number of statutory reserves to address life cycle costs of infrastructure. The action is reflective of best practices in asset management and also laid the foundation for asset management work at the town to refine the infrastructure funding gap based on a risk and service level scenario. The town has established 3 asset management reserves to address the renewal and replacement of assets. So the asset replacement reserve is used to address the life cycle needs of assets in the general fund. As I mentioned earlier, an annual contribution is made to the reserve from property taxes that are collected, and the funds in the reserve are used to address the renewal and replacement needs. The reserve balance is managed to hold a minimum balance in case funds are required to address unanticipated needs. The water and sewer infrastructure reserves are managed in much the same way as the asset replacement reserve. However, contributions to these reserves are made through revenue, user fee revenue, and parcel taxes collected within each utility. The opening 2026 projected balances for asset management reserves are modest, and the reserve balance combined with annual contributions are not at this point are not sufficient to sustainably support asset lifecycle replacement. Now, because I've gone through a significant amount of information in the previous slides, I've just prepared this slide to recap the key concepts. So every year, the town makes an annual contribution to its asset management reserves. In the case of the general fund asset management reserve, these contributions are funded through property taxation. Funding for required asset renewal and replacement is then drawn from these reserves, supplemented by grant funding where available. It is important to note, however, that grant opportunities for replacement of existing assets are limited. When combined, the current reserve balances and annual contributions are not sufficient to fully fund the replacement of assets at the end of their useful service life at this time. The shortfall between the funding currently available and the funding required for sustainable asset replacement is referred to as the infrastructure funding gap. As a result of the infrastructure funding gap, the town is required to defer the replacement of some assets beyond their intended service life. This increases the risk of asset failure and service interruptions and can lead to higher overall life cycle costs due to more reactive emergency repairs, or due to the risk of more reactive emergency repairs. So the town has transitioned away from its previous approach to asset management replacement funding that was based on a short-term 5-year funding perspective to a long-term life cycle approach. So the development of the asset management plan in 2023 compiled existing data into a single usable format, defined risk and level service for each major asset category, and determined average annual funding required to replace assets for each risk and service level scenario. Subsequent to developing the asset replacement plan, the asset replacement financial strategy, which is a roadmap of how to move from the current asset replacement budget to the required budget defined in the asset replacement plan, was developed and reviewed with council. The strategy is based on the evaluation of the asset health score of the town's assets. So the asset health score is an overall assessment of the condition and health of the town's assets. It is a function of past life assets, which is the percentage of the town's assets whose value exceeds their estimated useful life, and the consumption ratio, which is a measure of how far into an asset's estimated lifespan the town is. So presently, the town's asset health score has been determined to be 88%, which is very good. 6% of the town's assets are at past life, meaning that they are past their useful service life but are in active use, and the remaining assets are 52% consumed, meaning they are slightly more than halfway through their service life. If there is no change in funding for replacement of assets, then in 30 years, the asset health score of the town's assets will decline to 30%. And at that time, 32% of the town's assets would be past life. The remaining 68% of assets would be 90% consumed, meaning that they would be approaching the end of their service life and be nearing replacement. The consequence would be increasing failures of assets and increasing disruption in service. Council has committed to maintaining the town's current asset score of 88% into the future. The objective is to achieve a sustainable level of funding that allows the town to take a proactive rather than reactive approach to asset renewal. Achieving this will require increasing annual contributions to the asset replacement reserve at a level equivalent to 1.3% per year in property taxation over the next 14 years. At this level of funding, the infrastructure funding gap is projected to be significantly narrowed over that time frame. It is important to note that this timeline is subject to change and may be influenced by factors such as the level of investment in new assets, because new assets create additional pressure on life cycle costs, and any unanticipated changes in the condition or performance of existing assets. Oops. So staying the course with, oops, it went back a few, okay, there's a slide number 16 I want to be at, sorry. So staying the course with the asset financing strategy as outlined in the previous slide will increase annual contributions to the asset reserve from the current level of approximately $1.3 million to approximately $3.2 million over the next 14 years. This represents the level of funding required to support sustainable asset replacement. As noted earlier, contributions to the water sewer reserves are funded through user fees and parcel taxes specific to each utility. And based on projections, the timeline to achieve sustainable funding in these utilities ranges from 10 to 14 years. The impact on the average homeowner of moving towards asset replacement funding is estimated at approximately $32 annual increase in property taxes. This is based on a dedicated annual increase of 1.3% in property taxation revenue to support a higher contribution to the asset replacement reserve. For context, the owner of an average property currently contributes approximately $342 per year towards asset renewal and replacement for assets in the general fund. Under this approach, that contribution would increase to approximately $825 per year for the average household in 14 years. So we're now going to shift direction to talking a little bit about the capital replacement requirements and the required deferral of maintenance on assets. So during the capital budget process, staff prioritized asset replacement projects within the context of available funding. This chart illustrates the total capital replacement requirements alongside the projects proposed for replacement. Each stacked bar represents the total capital replacement requirement for each of the next 5 years. The darker blue portion of each bar reflects the cost of replacement projects proposed for inclusion in the general fund replacement budget. The lighter blue portion of each bar represents the replacement of projects that must be deferred each year due to funding constraints. These deferred replacements increase the town's exposure to higher life cycle costs as these assets are beyond their useful service life and carry a greater risk of failure. Over time, implementation of the asset replacement financial strategy is expected to reduce the level of deferred replacement as funding capacity gradually increases. So we'll now transition to a review of the replacement requirements for each major asset category in the capital replacement plan. The transportation and roads category includes approximately 109 kilometers of roadway. A pavement condition assessment of the town's roads was completed in 2019, which determined the overall pavement condition index, which is a measure of the condition of our roads, was 85, indicating that the roads are in very good condition. Road renewal and replacement planning is guided by the town's pavement management system and is informed by available funding constraints. A service level target pavement condition index of 82 is used for planning purposes, which would require an annual investment of just over $1 million for for roads replacement. At present, funding constraints do not support this level of reinvestment, and as a result, road replacement projects must be prioritized and phased to align within available funding. The average annual renewal and replacement requirement for transportation roads is approximately $1 million or $5 million cumulatively over the next 5 years. So based on projected balances in the asset replacement reserve and anticipated community works funding over the same period, the town is able to fund approximately $4 million of the $5 million required road replacement over the next 5 years. As a result, the infrastructure funding gap is expected to lead to cumulative deferred road replacement of approximately $1 million over that 5-year period. So over time, implementation of the asset replacement strategy is expected to reduce the level of deferred replacement as funding capacity gradually increases. In terms of drainage assets, the drainage category includes a diverse and extensive network of infrastructure across the community, consisting of approximately 49.1 kilometers of storm mains, 9.5 kilometers of culverts, and 6.9 kilometers of service laterals. Supporting this network are approximately 1,600 catch basins, 915 maintenance holes, and 40 kilometers of open ditches. A comprehensive drainage master plan is planned for 2026. This work will provide improved condition data, risk assessment, and long-term planning information to better guide renewal and replacement decisions for drainage assets. Until the master plan is completed, replacement planning is based on a combination of asset age, known condition, inspections, and available funding capacity. Wrong button there, sorry about that. So this chart illustrates the relationship between the identified drainage replacement needs and the budgeted provision in the capital plan, reflecting current funding constraints. Again, the dark blue portion of each bar represents funded drainage replacement projects included in the capital budget each year, and details of these projects will be reviewed in later slides as part of the 5-year capital replacement plan. The light blue portion illustrates replacement projects that are deferred due to limited funding capacity. So a key example is the Eagle Storm drainage system, which requires replacement in 2026 at an estimated cost of $1.7 million. The Eagle Crest drainage system is an example of infrastructure that was inherited by the town when the Eagle Crest area was incorporated into the town's boundaries. At that time, the condition and capital replacement cost of the system were not fully known, and replacement was not anticipated within the current planning horizon. As a result, sufficient funding is not presently available, and the risk of failure increases as replacement is deferred. I thought maybe that meant we had to run out of the room, sorry. There is a potential opportunity to address the replacement of the Eagle Crest drainage system in 2028 through the possible use of proceeds from the sale of Eagle Crest lands, subject to future council decision making. On the assumption that this funding source may be available, a placeholder for replacement has been included in the 2028 financial plan, capital plan. In addition, the School Creek Village Way storm system improvements have been identified as requiring replacement in 2028. And again, due to funding constraints, these works are also expected to be deferred. However, they have been included in the financial plan as a grant-dependent placeholder. Got to stop doing that. So the town owns approximately 60 facilities, of which 40 are leased to third parties. This slide highlights some of the larger facilities that are owned by the town. A comprehensive facilities condition assessment was completed in 2021. This assessment identified the full life cycle costs for the town's existing facilities and is regularly maintained and updated by town staff. Annual facilities decisions are guided by the assessment data, ongoing inspections, and are made within the context of available funding. Approximately $3.7 million is required over the next 5 years to address the renewal and replacement needs of town-owned buildings. Based on the current funding constraints, $550,000 per year has been allocated towards facilities renewal and replacement. In 2026, the Tosh roof and Civic Center upper roof, both of which are in poor condition and at the end of their service life, represent approximately $475,000 in deferred replacement costs. In 2027, the Tosh roof is scheduled for replacement. However, the Tosh siding, Civic Center siding, and Lee House siding, with a combined estimated replacement cost of $625,000, will come up for renewal and will need to be deferred, again due to funding limitations. Then as we move into 2028, the Lee House siding and the Civic Center roof can be accommodated within the available funding. However, in addition to the continued deferral of the Tosh siding, the train station building and airport hangar and terminal roof replacements, which become due with an estimated cost of $275,000, will need to be deferred. By 2030, the train station, town hall roof, and replacement of doors and hardware required at multiple town facilities are expected to remain deferred and will be prioritized alongside other asset renewal needs within the context of available funding. So in recognition of the infrastructure funding gap and the growing financial pressure to address building life cycle costs, a number of options are available in addition to the asset replacement strategy to help manage this gap. One key option is clarifying capital maintenance and replacement responsibilities between the town and its lessees. There are instances where capital maintenance is contractually the responsibility of the lessee, yet council is approached with requests for town funding to address capital replacement. Other options for consideration include divestment of assets or buildings, accelerated contributions to reserves, or continuing to defer life cycle replacement, which is what we're currently doing, recognizing that deferral results in the assumption of increased risk. To support informed decision-making, a framework to clearly define life cycle cost responsibilities for leased facilities will be brought forward for council discussion in 2026. So in the vehicles and equipment category, in addition to a range of specialized equipment, the town owns a fleet of approximately 74 vehicles, primarily supporting the public works, parks, and fire services departments. These fleet assets are essential to the delivery of a wide range of municipal services, including solid waste, underground utilities, roads, parks, building inspections, bylaw enforcement, fire and emergency planning, and administrative operations. A fleet greening and modernization study was completed in 2025. The study determined that the town's fleet is appropriately sized when compared with municipalities of a similar size and service levels, and recommended transitioning to electric and lower emission options when feasible. The average annual fleet renewal requirement is estimated at approximately $1 million. However, current reserve funding levels do not support full annual replacement, resulting in the extension of vehicle service lives beyond their useful service life. This again increases the risk of higher reactive maintenance costs and elevated life cycle costs over time. The town's total vehicle and equipment renewal and replacement requirements over the next 5 years are estimated at approximately $4.4 million, excluding the planned fire truck replacement in 2028. The fire truck replacement is excluded in this analysis because it represents a significant one-time investment that cannot be accommodated within the asset replacement reserve and will require a separate funding approach. Based on current funding capacity, approximately $4 million has been allocated for fleet and equipment replacement over the 5-year period. This results in approximately $400,000 in deferred equipment and fleet replacement, representing assets that are beyond their planned service life. The water fund includes a comprehensive system of assets that support potable water supply and distribution across the community. These assets include 9 groundwater wells, 108 kilometers of water mains, and approximately 4,000 water meters, supported by 5 reservoirs, 5 booster stations, and 451 hydrants. A water master plan is planned for completion in 2026. This work will provide enhanced condition data and long-term planning information to better inform renewal and replacement priorities for water infrastructure. The current priority for the water infrastructure renewal and replacement is systematic replacement of aging asbestos cement water mains, targeted at approximately 1,000 meters per year. This chart illustrates the level of replacement required to meet that priority compared with what can be delivered within available funding levels and staff capacity. The next section of today's session will focus on the proposed 5-year capital replacement plan, which has been developed by prioritizing asset renewal and replacement projects within the context of available funding and delivery capacity. A lot of numbers on this slide, but the 5-year financial infrastructure replacement program totals just over $40 million. The transportation, so just highlights from this slide for those following along, because I know the handout is, the screen is difficult to read. The transportation and airport asset categories include several grant-dependent replacement projects in 2026. These projects will be discussed in more detail in subsequent slides, which provide a breakdown of the proposed project budgets within each of the major asset categories listed in this chart. The facilities category for 2027 and 28 also includes a placeholder budget provision for $6 million in each of those years for the Operations Workplace Modernization Project. At this stage, this project is assumed to be a grant or debt funded and remains subject to future council decision making. The next few slides will highlight the proposed projects within each category that are recommended for inclusion in the capital replacement budget. So the 2026 Transportation Capital Program includes 3 projects along with a contingency for unforeseen works for a total budget provision of $5.1 million. The largest component is the $4.6 million Highway 19A Complete Street project, which is grant dependent. This project will proceed in 2026 only if external grant funding is approved. A grant application for this project has been submitted. In the outer years, 2027 through 2030, the annual budget provision for transportation replacement varies from approximately $650,000 to $1.2 million per year and reflects the replacement of assets that have reached the end of their useful life. Mr. Watson is going to provide further details on the major transportation capital replacement projects that are proposed as part of the 2026 capital plan. So over to you, Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. So this first slide is the Highway 19A Waterfront Complete Streets project. We've seen this one a few times. This is the $4.7 million project that we applied for a grant for. We haven't heard back yet. I don't know when we're going to hear back, but it could take a little bit yet. So we've earmarked that project in for 2026 if we do get the grant funding. And again, this project includes, most of it is grant dependent, specifically the 10-meter wide road width that we would be shifting over, widening and making complete streets out of. And then we had some other funding set aside for replacing the parking areas along that segment that we're going to replace. The next project is a placeholder for paving for 2026. We still have to have some interdepartmental meetings about this, but one of the projects that has been brought forward is the replacement of Primrose Street between Fern Road and 2nd Avenue. And you may recall in the financial plan last year, we had earmarked a fairly significant project for this block of road. It was a $2.5 million revitalization project. And so what that included was essentially replacing the sidewalks, the street trees, undergrounding the existing overhead infrastructure and adding light fixtures, as well as soil cells for the trees along that block. And that's how that project crept up to about $2.5 million. What we're throwing out there for this year is scaling that back and replacing or installing a new curb and gutter along one side of the road that's missing and a section on the west side. I wonder if I can. So this is where we would replace the curb and gutter where it's missing. And then over here we have a tree that's been causing some damage to the curb and gutter. So we would have to fix that over there. So that would be about a $200,000 project. But again, we still have some further discussions to take place about that. The next one is an intersection where we've had quite a few accidents, car versus car, car versus pedestrian type of accidents, and a lot of near misses. So there's a couple of components to this one. So this is at the intersection of Memorial and Fern, and on the west side of the road there, we would be adding designated lane markings. So the center lane would be for straight through or left, and then the right-hand lane would be right turn only. What's been happening is people that are waiting to make a left-hand turn there would wait, and people in the right-hand lane pass them. Now, not everybody's making a left-hand turn, so those people that are driving straight through on that center lane often get cut off by people who are darting through on the right-hand lane there. Yeah, so that direction there. The other problem is a similar situation where people that are heading northbound are approaching the intersection at a green light, and they're waiting to make a left-hand turn. And so some northbound people that are coming up from behind those vehicles are passing on the right-hand side and then hitting vehicles that are making a left-hand turn off of Memorial that way. So that would include basically a new node at that intersection. That's what that yellow curb is there. It's a new sidewalk extension there, restricting that movement for no people being able to go on the right-hand side of that vehicle. Everybody would have to use that lane to go straight, left, or right. We may do something on the northwest corner over here. The challenge at that particular location is that the transit bus may not be able to make the stop and then go around that node to make the right-hand turn, but we're looking into that.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. So this next table here presents the proposed draft 5-year drainage category replacement budget. The outer year 2028 in this table includes a $1.75 million provision for the Eagle Crest Drive storm main replacement project. This is infrastructure, as I'd mentioned earlier, that was inherited by the town when Eagle Crest was incorporated into the town's boundaries. As noted earlier in the presentation, the storm main is currently at the end of its service life. Existing town reserves are not sufficient to fund a replacement of this magnitude. As a result, the project has been included in 2028, subject to future council decision-making regarding the funding source. At this time, proceeds from the potential sale of the Eagle Crest lands have been assumed as the funding source for this project. And Mr. Watson will provide further details on the three drainage projects proposed for 2026. The contingency included in the project here serves as a placeholder for unforeseen drainage-related works.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. So this first project, I've mentioned it before, this is along the waterfront where we're going to be completing the Complete Streets project. We've video cameraed and flushed all of the cross culverts that go underneath the highway there, and we've learned that 4 of them need to be replaced before we do the Complete Streets project. And we didn't think that this would be a line item that would be eligible for grant replacement. So we've elected to put this as a separate project. Plus it's quite a time-consuming project. Anyways, there are 4 culverts that have reached the end of their life that need to be replaced, and that's what this project is for. And we actually do have early budget approval for this project to proceed. So we'll be working on that very soon here. The next project is located on Crescent Road West at Grandin Creek. And this is the outfall where all the stormwater collects on a large portion of Crescent Road West and discharges down to Grandin Creek. The photo on the left there is a photo of the existing culvert that is discharging the water down the embankment to the trail below. It is missing a large portion of that culvert and is causing some erosion, and we need to replace that before it causes any significant damage to the Crescent Road West itself. sorry, the plan for this location is to install a manhole at the top of the embankment on the shoulder of Crescent Road West, and then install a high-density polyethylene solid plastic pipe to get the water safely down to the bottom of the slope with a diffuser on the bottom so we don't experience any more erosion. This next project is located at the end of Buller Road. This has been a maintenance problem for many years. The problem at this particular location is that the storm outfalls discharge below the high water mark. And what happens is every high tide, the sand fills up the end of the pipe, and we have to clean it out on a very regular basis, especially in the winter months. So we are looking to construct some diffusers similar to what we have at the roundabout, where you have like a manhole with large rocks on the outside to let the water soak into the manhole through the beach sand and out into the ocean without it filling up with sand. So we're looking at that as an option. So in 2026, we'll do the design for that, make sure that that's actually achievable. And then in 2027, we're hoping to construct.
Thank you, Oliver. This table outlines projects proposed for the buildings and facilities renewal and replacement category over the next 5 years. Facilities replacement projects with an estimated cost greater than $100,000 are shown as standalone projects in this table. Smaller renewal and replacement works, so under $100,000 in cost, are grouped within the line item titled Facilities Asset Management Renewal in this chart. I believe it is the second line down in the listing. So as noted earlier, the outer years 2027 and 28 include a combined $12 million placeholder for the renewal and replacement of the public works and parks work yards identified as the Operations Workplace Modernization Project. Just a reminder that at this stage, this project is assumed to be grant or debt funded and remains subject to future council decision making. Projects in this chart marked with an asterisk indicate assets that have exceeded their useful service life, where replacement has been deferred beyond the recommended timing due to funding constraints. This deferral, as I've mentioned many times before, increases the risk of reactive maintenance requirements prior to replacement. The facilities renewal work plan for 2026 is illustrated in the next slide, and Mr. Stanger, our Manager of Operations, will review the 2026 work plan in more detail.
Thanks. Good morning. Yeah. My apologies. The plan for 2026 is the public works roof and sliding, and with that we need to do some interim repairs. Obviously with the operations workplace modernisation still on review, we would just like to do the interim repairs only and not do full replacement of the roofs that is required. So we're just going to do that, and more than have a 25-year plan for our roofs. It's going to be for the next 5 until we have more information regarding our operational workplace modernisation. The second item that we're planning to do in 2026 is the community hall furnace and ducting. This has been an issue for the last several years, and it is due for replacement. The age of that is 1992, so it's well beyond its life expectancy, and it's just causing some issues, so that's for replacement. Our Civic Centre gym floor and our community hall floor, we are going to do the resurfacing in both of them. The floor for that one in the Civic Centre room is 34 years old, and at the community hall was 22 years. So although we've done work over the years, it's time that we can actually do the sanding and resurfacing of both those floors to keep them in good conditions for years to come. The other project that we've got at the Civic Centre is our HVAC system, and one of those issues that we're having is the DDC, which is our direct digital controller, which has been causing us severe issues, and it's at end of life. And unfortunately, we can't get parts to do the replacement, so we need to do the change out of that control, which will then help with all our HVAC system within the Civic Centre. The Town Hall upper building exterior painting, that was due to get done last year. It was deferred to this year, and what's going to happen with that one is we did the lower last year because it was in poorer condition, and this year that we're planning to do the exterior painting, which will be the walls, trim and window frames. And the last one, and one of the bigger projects for the year, is our curling rink roof is due for replacement. We've spent considerable amount of money on repairs over the last 45 years, and it's been addressed that this roof is needing replaced, and that is going to be in the plan for 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanger. So budget provisions in the parks and budget provisions for replacement of assets in the parks and trails area include trail and sidewalk reconstruction, erosion protection at Seaside Nature Park, and the replacement of worn street banners and seasonal decorations and hanging baskets. Mr. Stanger and Mr. Watson, again, are going to provide some further details on the projects and works planned for 2026.
My apologies. The trail and sidewalk recondition is a large project that we need to try and address. And this year we've planned, the biggest one is the Grandin Creek Trail. The issues that we're having with that one is bank stabilisation, drainage and soil conditions. So it's been addressed that we would like to spend some of the funds on the trail, and the biggest one would be that one would be the Grandin Creek. The other one that we're looking at is Memorial Avenue, and that's for our sidewalks, where we've been having issues with the trees and the sidewalk lifting. So we're looking at that one. But our biggest one would be on Grandin Creek for that creek, and that is from Hoy Lake down to Crescent Road East.
The next project that we have for replacement next year, or this year, for design specifically, is located at Seaside Nature Park. That's at the Brant, the Faye Smith viewing area. It may not be noticeable for people who visit the park, but if you walk down onto the beach and look up at the green space there, there's quite a bit of erosion that's taking place. And it's not going to stop until we implement some preventative measures there. So this year we are planning to create a design and hopefully construct in 2027.
Thank you. So just under $5 million in replacement provisions for the vehicles and equipment category are included in the 2026 to 2030 financial plan, with approximately $650,000 per year allocated for fleet replacement. It's important to note that the fire department apparatus is scheduled for replacement in 2028. I talked about this a little bit earlier as well. And this represents a significant capital investment that cannot be accommodated within the asset replacement reserve and will require a separate funding approach. At this stage, long-term borrowing has been assumed as borrowing has been approved as the funding strategy, as the asset replacement fund is not able to support the replacement of this magnitude. Mr. Stanger will now provide additional details on the 2026 fleet replacement provisions proposed for inclusion in the 2026 capital replacement budget.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. As you can see, our fleet replacement budget for 2026 is $650,000. And although it looks like we've only got 3 vehicles this year, 2 of these vehicles are frontline vehicles. Our Freightliner truck is at 2010, and that is one of our frontline vehicles that we use for all our snow removal and all our larger jobs. That's an essential piece of equipment. We actually have 2 of those size trucks in our fleet, and this one is due for replacement. We've spent considerable amount of money on repairs over the last few years, and it's just end of life. Our second one is our dump truck, which we actually call like our 1-ton truck. On 2024, we changed one out as well, and we used it into the hook lift truck, which has been a great success. There's multiple different bodies that you can put on that truck. So for the dump truck, our unit number 74, we're going to be changing out, and we're going to do another hook lift truck, and that will then help us use 2 trucks for having multiple different appliances that we can use it from, and hopefully down the line that would then be able to take one of our third trucks off that would be able to actually not use that one. We could just go down to 2 vehicles. So that's our plan for that one. The other piece of equipment that we've actually got is one of our ploughs that's used in Unit 16. Is a very old piece of equipment we've had, not like the picture that you see up there. So it's due for replacement. One thing that we are going to do when we do replace that one, we're going to replace it with the one that we got when we got our loader, and that is going to actually have the arms on it. So when we go into the cul-de-sacs and we do the clearing, we can actually use the arms come out and they come in, and that helps for the snow removal when we're doing that work and not blocking in driveways. It certainly helps in that one. So that will be a great addition. And then the last one is a 2004 pickup. It's one of our 4 Rangers, or smaller trucks that we've got, and we're hoping to replace that and looking into an electric van for 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanger. So I'll speak to the other equipment replacement provisions that are included in the equipment replacement plan for 2026. The council chambers conference system is about 10 years old and is outdated and has limited functionality and is complex to operate. Replacing the system will support improved live streaming, better integration with Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and allow improved remote access. Overall, the upgrade will provide an enhanced experience for residents, council, and staff with improved audio and visual capability, while also reducing ongoing technical support and maintenance requirements of the existing system. The current system is approximately 10 years old. In terms of other equipment replacement planned for 2026, it includes replacement of the end-of-life computer server. That replacement will reduce the risk of security threats and failure of the town's information processing systems. We also have 7 tablet computers that are planned to be replaced in fire trucks, which will support computer-aided dispatch. This replacement will be funded from NG 911 grant funds. And personal protective equipment must be maintained in accordance with NFPA standards. 30 fire suppression helmets that have reached the end of their useful service life need to be replaced in 2026. Those helmets must be replaced after 10 years of service or after they fail inspection, whichever comes first. Now, switching over to the Airport Capital Replacement Program. This program includes budget provisions for the replacement of the runway, taxiway, and apron asphalt overlay, as well as a replacement of a loader snowblower. These projects are grant dependent and are included in the capital replacement budget, subject to approval of ACAP grant funding. The town's 2025 grant applications were denied, and the town has reapplied for funding in 2026 and is waiting to hear back. The results of these grant applications are usually announced about March or April. The annual renewal of, the annual renewal of AC water main varies from 1.1 to 2 million per year in the 5-year planning period, with 4,000 meters of pipe anticipated to be replaced at a cost of 7.8 million over the next 5 years. With the exception of the placeholder for the AC water main replacement on Eagle Crest Drive in 2028, which is assumed in the financial plan to be funded from future Eagle Crest land sales, subject to future council decision-making, of course. All water infrastructure replacement is funded from the Water Infrastructure Reserve. I'm going to call on Mr. Watson to provide further details of the proposed project for water main replacement in 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. So this is the AC replacement project that we are planning to do for 2026. It's located along Seacrest Road in the Eagle Crest subdivision. So we would tie in at the bottom of Seacrest Hill where we did the slope reconstruction this year and replaced the main to the last fire hydrant at the end of the road, or near the end of the road where it transitions back to PVC. And that would replace about 480 meters of AC pipe that we have in our inventory.
Thank you again, Mr. Watson. So we will now transition from a discussion focused on replacement of existing assets to an overview of proposed investments in new assets, which are intended to support long-term community needs. Over the next 5 years, $24 million of budget provision for investment in new projects is proposed to be included in the capital plan. Due to limited funding constraints and reserves for investment in new infrastructure, many of the new investment initiatives are grant or land sales dependent. Additional information for projects is included in each category of assets and will be reviewed in the next few slides. So the transportation category includes a budget provision of $630,000 for 4 new investment projects in 2026. The Eagle Crest Traffic Impact Study and road upgrades include funding in 2026 for a traffic impact study, which will provide further information on appropriate traffic solutions for Highway 19A in this area. A placeholder budget provision for construction in 2027 has been included. However, both the scope and cost of the work remain subject to future council decision-making. The placeholder is currently based on an anticipated solution cost with assumed funding from proceeds of the Eagle Crest land sales and external grant funding, as the town does not have sufficient reserve funding to support a project of this scale. Placeholders for the Highway 19A entrance signage, multiple entrance signage design, and East Village Phase 3 are also included and in outer years of this plan and are dependent, basically are grant and debt dependent at this time. These projects are included in the financial plan based on prior council direction. I would also like to point out the projects within the accessibility improvements budget provision will be developed in consultation with the accessibility committee. And Mr. Watson is going to walk through the details of the larger transportation projects proposed for 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. The first project is the KSS traffic calming project. This one came up last year. We've applied for a grant. We haven't heard back yet. So this one would include some new median islands. It's traffic calming just in front of the school. So it would include some median islands on each end of the frontage of the school, as well as a new crosswalk at Condor Close. That's on the west end of the school property. And new RRFBs, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the pedestrian crosswalk flashers. Those would be installed at both crosswalks, the existing one on the east end and the new one at Condor Close. And again, that's a $345,000 grant project that we're waiting to hear back on. The next one is some new RRFBs on Memorial Avenue at First Street. This was a council request back in 2024 to put in a crosswalk near this location. And the challenge at this particular location, if anyone's wondering why there has never been a crosswalk on that north side of First Street, is that it's too close to the railway tracks, and there are restrictions when you're within a certain distance of the railway tracks as what you can do for stopping vehicles, such as the need for arms on the railway tracks to stop cars, like you would find at, say, Bowen Road in Nanaimo. But there has been some changes in consideration at the Island Corridor Foundation. We're in talks with them about bending some of those rules or making some arrangements with them to install some temporary crosswalks at this location. So these would be solar-powered lights. They would be easy to remove and relocate if the tracks were to ever become active again. And it also includes a new street light on the northwest corner. So that would be right there. And that black arched corner is a tighter curb that we would construct to both shorten the crosswalk length as well as to slow people down when they are heading southbound, coming up the hill from Memorial and turning right onto Harlech. It wouldn't, right now it's quite a sea of asphalt there, and we would make that a little tighter for, make people slow down as they're going around that corner. And that would be our community transportation plan project for 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. The drainage category includes two placeholder budget provisions in the outer years 2028 and 2029. A placeholder in 2028 has been included to address potential drainage deficiencies that may be identified and require remediation. At this time, it is assumed that this work would be funded through proceeds from Eagle Crest land sales, subject to future council decision-making. In addition, a grant-dependent placeholder has been included in 2028-29 for the Hoy Lake Road Detention Pond project. A budget provision for investment in new facilities over the next 5 years totals just under $5.5 million. Proposed new asset investments in 2026 include upgrades at Eagle Crest Golf Course, the garage site development, a contingency for emergency repairs at the Qualicum Commons, and the installation of a cenotaph on Memorial Avenue. Mr. Sales is going to provide further details on the material 2026 investment items.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. The first item is the Eagle Crest course upgrade and facility upgrades project. This is something that we discussed as the acquisition process was started and the purchase was finalized. The golf course itself needs some upgrades and deferred to recover from deferred maintenance over the last 10, 15 years. Also to reconfigure the course. So at this time, we anticipate that cost will be $2.5 million. There is a request for proposals that's currently being considered by contractors. Second item is the bus garage site planning and construction project. This includes a public square or public space on the corner of Memorial and Fern. This was the subject of a major planning initiative a few years ago. The total budget allocation over the period of this financial plan is $1.8 million. There is $1 million in the budget in the near future, and that is if there's investments required in the area of the bus garage, then that would be the resource that the town is able to draw upon. However, if the need for that funding at this time is not needed, it would be carried forward to a future year. The Qualicum Commons, the town is currently in a 1-year lease with the school district with an option to continue for another 9 years for a total of 10 years. When the town entered into this, there were and continue to be a number of unknowns in terms of the maintenance of the building and the amount of work that's going to be needed. And at that time, council nominally allocated $590,000 as a contingency fund should some sort of major repair be required during the course of the 1-year term while we're evaluating this. To date, that funding has not been needed, so hopefully that continues to be the case and there's no need to draw upon that contingency, but that is the reason that it exists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. The proposed budget provision for investment in new parks and trails infrastructure over the next 5 years, included in the financial plan, is approximately proposed to be included in the financial plan is approximately $4.5 million. Mr. Watson is going to walk through the significant projects proposed for 2026 in more detail in just a moment. The 2026 budget includes 6 projects, which represent an investment in new assets. It is important to note that the outer years include placeholder provisions for park improvements and pedestrian improvements in the Eagle Crest area. The land sale strategy approved by Council for development of the Eagle Crest area may provide potential funding opportunities for these projects. Accordingly, these placeholders have been included in the financial plan on the assumption of future proceeds from the Eagle Crest land sales could be used, subject to future Council decision-making. Current town reserve balances are not sufficient to support investments of this magnitude. In 2028, the plan also includes a grant-dependent placeholder for a new facility to support community park users based on prior council direction. And in addition, the Satlam Playground provision was shifted from 2026 to 2028 as part of the 2025-29 financial plan amendment and remains subject to future council decision-making.
This first project is, as there has been a change of helm at the Island Corridor Foundation, there's some interest there to construct trails along the railway corridor. And our first thought was to construct a trail between Memorial Avenue and the train station. So the train station is located right there. And of course, Memorial Avenue is on the right-hand side of the photo there. So the reason this would be an important section of trail is because we have that east-west connector trail that extends from Sunrise Drive on the east end of town all the way over to Laburnum Road on the west side of town. But there's a gap. The gap extends from there at the corner of Fir Street and Memorial. And then there's the rest of the west connector trail takes off from a Mill Road over there on the left-hand side of the photo. So the idea here would be a 1.5 to 2 meter width, a gravel trail running parallel to the railway tracks from Memorial and discharging somewhere near the train station itself. The next one for consideration, now this was an idea that came up before we had a porta potty out at the skateboard park. But the idea was on the right-hand side there is a toilet facility. It's just essentially a concrete building that sits on top of a 1,000-gallon holding tank. It has very good capacity compared to a porta potty. A porta potty, for instance, would have about 40-gallon capacity compared to a 1,000-gallon capacity. So you don't have to suck it near as often, and you don't have those weekend calls where somebody's saying that the toilet's full, do something. Furthermore, the building is all made of concrete, top to bottom, including the roof, and there's a steel door on it. On the left there, we were considering a fountain in that general area. So these two items would be located between the edge of the skateboard park and the Civic Center itself just outside of the parking area. And the reason we hadn't considered like flush toilets is because the closest sanitary connection would be on the far side of the Civic Center, which is quite a long ways through the parking lot to connect a facility. So this is sort of a step up from a porta potty and fairly simple to maintain. The next one is the pickleball courts. We still have it in our plan. The pickleball club do have some funding they'd like to spend towards installing some pickleball courts this year. We haven't quite ironed out where that location is going to be, so that's a bit of a work in progress, but we're trying to make some progress there. And next one is a project located on Country Club Drive, down by the cottages. That's that's Eagle Crest Road. Oops, sorry. That's a little too fast. That's Eagle Crest Drive at the bottom, Whitby, and Country Club going up to the highway there. So there's been the developer of those properties contributed $130,000 towards landscaping the boulevard in behind those new cottages there. So this funding is for putting out a proposal to do the landscaping. It'll look something like this, where we'll have a path going down the boulevard, a pedestrian path, and then some grass adjacent to it, and perhaps some decorative trees along that stretch of boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. And I'll call on Mr. Sales to speak to the servicing costs provision included in the projected financial plan.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. The servicing costs, as on the slide, is essentially a placeholder. We know that there's some subdivision activity that needs to happen this year to prepare both the small parcels and the larger parcels for potential sale, subject to council decision-making in the future. So the budget allocation for all that work is $625,000 as a placeholder. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. So investments in new infrastructure at the airport included in the 2026 budget provision are for the installation of CCTV cameras on runway 19, and council provided early budget approval for this project. In addition, placeholder provisions are included for a generator in 2027 and three-phase power in 2029, and both of these projects are grant dependent. Mr. Goldfuss, our airport manager, will provide further additional details on these proposed investments.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. So the CCTV camera for runway 11, what it will do is it will improve monitoring off of runway 11 for activities for aircraft, for monitoring departure and arrivals. Currently, we can see the end of runway 11, but this will provide extra capacity. The airport generator, it's grant dependent for $168,000, and it's placed in 2027. The three-phase power, it is also grant dependent. This BC Hydro commissioned in 2024, they commissioned a study. This came as a result of Sealand Flight School purchasing an electric aircraft, which is called a Pipistrel. It's a two-seater trainer aircraft. And they purchased that in 2025 with the intent of moving forward with more electric aircraft. So in 2024, BC Hydro, they commissioned a study. They paid for that study. And as a result of that, the engineer has provided a conceptual report to the town. In that conceptual report, it talks of two options, one at 1.8 million and one at 1.2. The difference in the price on that is basically the type of charger and the kilowatt hours that it will provide. So staff is recommending to place this in the 2029 budget at $1.8 million as a placeholder, and it again will be 100% or grant dependent.
Thank you, Mr. Goldfuss. So, Your Worship, the next step in the budget process is the public information session scheduled for January 28th, which will focus on the operating budget. And following that, again, first and second readings along with council deliberations and direction are scheduled for February 25th. The budget will then be brought forward for third reading on March 25th, with final adoption anticipated for April 1st. Your Worship, that concludes the presentation, and the team would be happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. I think on behalf of council, I think that's a terrific job you did. You put a lot of stuff together in a pretty short time, so my compliments to you and your team. Questions from the gallery? Any comments or questions from the gallery? Seeing none, council, any comments or thoughts?
Okay, so I've got 13 notes in total, so I'm happy to do like 2 or 3, and then we can go around.
Go
So
ahead.
I'm not just hogging the microphone for 15 minutes and making everyone fall asleep. The first thing I just want to note, I just did a quick Google while we started. Right now, our process is set to wrap up on April Fool's Day, but we do have until May 15th. Is the legislated date where we have to have our budget in. Obviously, that's not ideal. And I do want to echo the mayor. We've had, behind the scenes, there's some staffing stuff happening where Mr. Hare's not working with the same number of hours that he used to be working with. So I do understand it's a lot of work. Okay. And then just the first one, we've got a lot of emails about the all-in for Eagle Crest. I know we have some of the costs set out here, and some of them are on page 23, and then there's other things that are being deferred on page 25. And I'm sure this is the case, but just to double check, when we see the same item listed twice, it's being deferred all those years. It's not 2 separate projects with that sum that are in the deferred column. I'm assuming that, Mr. Hare.
Mr. Hare.
That is correct. But on your comment with respect to the adoption of the financial plan, it's actually the tax rate bylaws that have to be adopted by May 15th, and the financial plan needs to be adopted prior to the tax rate bylaw being adopted.
So yes, we do have a bit of a crunch. And then this is going to be a very common question through all of these. I think I have about 5 that are the same question, but just on page 34, which, I didn't write down which one it was. I just have the comments on, I think this is one of the road improvements. Yeah, it's the big road improvement for the 19A. What % of that is grant funded? So when we have these big projects that say grant dependent, what percentage of that do we know, or is this something that maybe changes? Because sometimes it's like 20% municipal, sometimes it's 33, sometimes it's 40. I'm just wondering, do we know at this point what the percentage is that would be the municipal contribution for that?
So the grant funding stream under which we applied was 100% grant funding.
Let's just do one more, and then I guess I'll pass the mic around. Page 39, that's when we had the failing, the Grandin Creek outflow that was failing, and then we designed a solution and also have the new, the piping will actually address the erosion. And I'm really glad with the solution. I have no comments on that. Staff are doing a great job. It's just, it's not really clear from the handout that we are actually fixing the erosion issue. So just maybe something in the future where we actually have that made a little bit more clear. Because some folks might look at that and say, oh, we're just putting a new pipe at the top of the hill and it's all gonna erode all over again, so what are we doing? But yeah, good job on actually addressing the erosion issue, because that is something that adds up over time. And with that, I have a bunch more, but I think I should probably let others have a go.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions, comments. First of all, page 36, the intersection of Memorial Avenue and Fern. This intersection I think is one of the highest accident rates in our town. But with the traffic, with the proposed bump out and the traffic going north, is there an option perhaps to have an advanced left turn or something? Because I would be concerned that perhaps the traffic would be backed up if there's a lot of traffic, oncoming traffic. And I just wondered if that's something that you would be considering or thinking about.
That's a really good question. I will ask the traffic engineer that question. That's a good question. I will. That wasn't a suggestion that he brought forward to create this, but I will ask that question. That's a good one.
Thank you. And having navigated this intersection in a wheelchair previously on access awareness days and such. It was actually the corner on the northeast side that was quite problematic for people in wheelchairs, the angle of that slope. So I don't know if there's any improvements that could be made to that area, or if there have been. It was a couple of years ago since I did that. But it was certainly, it scared me when I started going up that incline. So those, I guess, are more comments. Page 39, again, that's the Crescent Road West and Grandin Creek. I know that on Crescent Road itself, there's quite a dip in that area, and I wondered if that's related to that culvert and if there would be any work done to that.
Yes, I know the dip you're talking about there. This is close to that dip, but it's not the cause of the dip. I think the dip problem is from a corrugated steel pipe that crosses underneath Crescent Road. That's a problem, and we do need to fix that. That's a separate location. It's close, but it's not there.
Okay, and then page 42, we're looking at facilities, and there was a study that we were doing on greening both the community hall and the civic center, I believe, and I just wondered if that study or the results of that study would have any impact on these decisions, particularly around the community hall furnace and the HVAC system at the civic center.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. Yes, that report would potentially have an impact. It's currently in draft form, and we're working with the consultant to finalize that, and it might have recommendations on the way that the HVAC is upgraded at the Civic Center and potentially how the community hall is done. Thank you.
You guys are so thoughtful. Councillor Van Vogt.
Well, I don't have as many questions as others. I did have a comment again on page 36, because that seems to be a very problematic intersection. I think at one point a resident mentioned having a right-hand turn when you're turning from Memorial on to, where are we? Yeah, from Fern on to Memorial. So you would be traveling east. Your direction things have gotten me quite confused, but if you're traveling from Memorial, from Fern onto Memorial, and you're heading towards Rupert, we'll just say that, so to me that's south, mentioned having a turn lane there only, and said that that was what it had been like previously. Is there any consideration given to that? Because if people are waiting for the light to turn left, then oftentimes there's a traffic lineup.
Thank you, through the chair. That's a good question. So on the proposal here, we've proposed adding a couple of arrows there. So I think what you're talking about is coming out of Quality Foods there and then taking a right onto Memorial from Fern. So that arrow would be a right turn only arrow. And then if you wanted to go straight through on Fern or left onto Memorial, we would have that lane as designated for those options. Is that what you're asking?
No.
Oh, sorry.
If you're coming out of the parking lot onto Memorial, so you're going to turn right at the parking lot and you're hitting the traffic light, turning right from there. Is that what I'm looking at?
So maybe I should have oriented this better, but on the top left we have Quality Foods there and we have PharmaSave over here. Coming out of the parking lot towards Memorial this is Fern, so you would hang a right. That would be your only move. That's a proposed arrow. That's not there.
My mistake.
Okay.
So you are doing exactly what I suggested. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
so-
clarifying that for me.
Those arrows,
I got a little turned around, obviously.
those arrows don't actually exist. I just inserted those there to show what we'd planned on doing.
Correct. And that was what had been there in the past.
I don't know if those arrows ever existed. I'm going to say
Okay.
they haven't. We've asked about it before, but I don't think they ever existed. They
Okay.
should be there.
Okay. Now, my next question, going a little farther north on Memorial to the intersection that's at Second, that seems to be quite a problematic intersection as well. Is there any consideration to making improvements at that intersection?
We haven't got anything planned for that intersection. That would probably be something we should add to our community transportation plan list for review from Mr. Richard Adoul there. What type of improvements would you be looking for there, like RFB crosswalks?
I'm not sure if that would solve it, but it's just, I think it would be more some kind of controlled traffic intersection, because right now it's really difficult to make a left turn from Second onto Memorial. And also, well, if you're turning left from Memorial onto Second, there's quite a bit of traffic, and because there already are 3 crosswalks, then it really, it's quite a conglomeration of vehicles and people. So I'd leave that up to a traffic engineer.
That is something I can bring forward, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Young.
Going to page 25, I'd like to know if Tosh and the train station can be considered for looking for heritage grants on those 2 buildings?
Thank you. Through the chair, that's certainly something that we can look out for. I'm not aware of any right now that would apply to those, but we can certainly look out for them.
Thank you for that. And then on page 26, is probably embarrassing to ask, but what does divestment mean?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Young, divestment would mean disposing of assets that are not required. And in addition, I believe Ms. Varela has a comment to add.
For greater clarity, it would be asking council to consider sale of certain assets.
Then on page 42, when it comes to resurfacing like the civic floor and painting of buildings, could that be deferred? Like, is it considered kind of cosmetic? Could we maybe loan some of that money towards infrastructure needs that would be more prioritized? I'm just wondering if the resurfacing and then painting it that's considered on page 42, if it's cosmetic and if it can be deferred.
Mr. Stenger.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Young, where we get this information from is from our Altus report. It was discussed in one of the earlier slides regarding the one that we look at, and that one gives us guidance on what is required. We could defer, but then your lifespan of that could then be a lot less because you're not keeping up with both that work. So it's in the town's interest to do from the plan that we're going through the Altus report.
And then thank you for that. And then on page 43, when we talk about banners and hanging baskets, and if we're trying to save some money, this isn't a lot of money that's being spent on it, but can we get down to maybe going back to maybe bare bones and not doing so much as far as beautification of our downtown? I'd also like to see that their business license I don't think it's ever gone up. I think for $110 that's required on business license, the businesses would be willing to pay $200. When we take out a little ad in the newspaper, it's $300, and that's just, in for that one printing and it's gone. And so I don't know, I'm just speaking for myself, but I think business licenses, we could pay more. Also on the hanging baskets, maybe we can get corporate sponsors, or I'm thinking QF. But anyways, but also some of the smaller businesses, we'd be willing to put some money towards a hanging basket that's in front of our store, just like we do beautification inside our business. I think we would be willing to offer to do that. I think we should ask.
Councillor Harrison.
Okay, so I'll weigh in on page 36 as well, because I think that's what we're all doing, is the busiest intersection in town. And Councillor Skipsey is correct. There's two ways you can look at crash data. One is incidents, and the other is injuries. So one is just like any sort of accident. The reason why, for example, Village Way in 19A historically has had a lot of accidents is the motion where you're on Village Way, you're making your right onto the highway, and you think you can go, and then you start to go, and then you stop, and you see the car in front of you start to go, so you shoulder check, go to the left, and then the car in front of you is actually stopped really fast, so you have this little bump, but it registers as an accident, but it's actually not an injury usually. But that does have some injuries. And my question is just, right now we have two traffic motions basically. We have north-south, one light, east-west, one light. Why don't we try maybe looking at an option for three, where you have north only, left hand or straight, everyone goes through. South only, left hand, right, left hand or straight, everyone goes through. And then east-west, same as before. I'm just thinking, because the accidents I see are people, you're waiting for that one person who's turning left, and then there's a pedestrian, and then they're unsure, and then fine, screw, I'll just go around. And then you drive off in a huff, and then you cause an accident. But if you just had one direction where everyone can go either left or straight, and you break it up, you'll be waiting longer at the lights, right? So it will have an impact on traffic flow, but that would probably get rid of that passing people interaction. And then that might be something where we just have to add the left-hand turn signal under the green light, or have a dual purpose light. And I'm just seeing Ms. Varela raise her hand.
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think these pieces are really interesting if we keep it with an eye to referring these to the traffic engineer. So I have time-stamped this meeting so that he could actually take a look at that. So I'll do that for other councillors who may weigh in as well, and Mr. Trudel can take a look at that. Thank you.
And that is exactly what should happen. So yeah, I'm not an expert here. I'm just thinking that I've seen it myself, where you're sitting stuck behind someone for the whole light because it's just the one car going left and they can't go. So that would solve it, but it does create other problems because you do now have 3 movements instead of 2. So it's just one thing. Secondly, page 46, conference system. I understand why staff were recommending that. Everything now, especially too with like a lot of consultants, it's a real hassle to get them to come here, pay their hotel, their ferry costs. So it makes sense that we want to have a very seamless IT solution for that. Also for us too. I'll just note though that I always hesitate when it says council getting $100,000 for it, and we've just finished updating the sound and camera not too long ago, and it's really good, but I sort of get it, but I just have a little bit of hesitancy around like what is the actual savings we're going to see on that over time, and maybe that's something we defer a year or two. And last one, just because Chief Cornell's here and he might not be here. Who knows? So on page 49, we were talking about the helmets, and all the helmets need to be replaced. And are there a range of options in terms of safety? Or is it just like a helmet is a helmet is a helmet? It doesn't impact breathing apparatus or anything else. It's just the same thing. Just because for me, like, I do worry about our volunteer firefighters, like for all the sort of things they're subjected to. So I'm just wondering, is there like a range of costs for this, or is this just like, it's all the same and this is just the fixed cost?
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Harrison, there's multiple different suppliers that we can get the helmets from. but they all have to be NFPA standards. So there's a standard that they have to apply to, and then we can choose anything within that spectrum of helmets.
So yeah, it's basically, you'll be getting very similar. It's just the costing and who the supplier is, I'm assuming then?
Yeah, our biggest thing is, through the chair, is looking at costing and parts and availability. So what you buy today is, can we now get the parts for it, and is the availability when we have to replace that helmet or add extras, can we still get that helmet? A lot of manufacturers going in and out of business, or suppliers no longer carry the parts, so we are really looking at what's the longevity look of those helmets over the short-term costs.
Thank you very much. It's a very thorough response for a question, but I just, safety over firefighters, it is kind of an important issue. And then maybe last one, number 50, and this is going to be the second of 5. Sorry, not sure which it was because I marked everything by page number. It didn't have a description. This is airport, so the big airport grant. This is the federal airport grant, if I recall correctly. And then what percentage of that would be municipal? Is that another 100% grant? I'm seeing a nod from Mr. Watson.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Again, the ACAP grants are 100% funded. There will be a component which we haven't included a provision for if we are successful on the runway paving. There is a portion of the apron that the grant will not cover, and that's approximately equivalent to about 10% of the budget, the budgeted amount here.
Sorry, and I do appreciate the response. I'm sorry to be a little bit tedious, but this is a lot of money, and you know, if it's 66% versus 100%, it has a big impact on taxes. So I just want to make sure there's clarity on that. My apologies. And then with that, I should probably pass it on to the next councillor in the row.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a comment and then maybe, well, maybe it's another comment. Anyways, fleet replacement on page 46. I know it came up, I can't remember if it was at strategic planning or OCP, but we talked about the option of looking at the option of maybe leasing equipment so that we're not committed to 15 years of a gas combustion engine. And I just wanted to flag that whether or not that would be something we could look at if these vehicles were not available in an electric option at this time. The next one was on page 65, and that was with regard to the skate park. And I know at one time the group that was fundraising, my understanding was that the monies that they fundraised, we would still, the costs would be the same, but those monies would go towards some of the extras and improvements to what was being built at the time. So I didn't know whether if that group is still around, whether they would still be willing to do some fundraising. It helps to keep that community cohesive and being effective. So when it comes to a water fountain, maybe not the toilet, but maybe a water fountain. Thank you. I wonder if Mr. Sales has any comments.
Mr. Sales?
Yes, thank you to the chair, to Councillor Skipsey. There is an opportunity to potentially get some contribution for the water fountain. I think it's a community benefit. Maybe not so much the toilet, but so when council considers the budget, if you didn't fully fund the amount on the screen, then we would be reaching out to see whether there's other contributions available. Thank you.
Okay.
And I guess my last one was related to the airport on page 69. The I think it's 16,000 for a new camera. And at the last meeting, I think I determined that this is not the $5,500 option that was presented in a previous staff report. But what I'm wondering is that does the 16,000 and the new camera there kind of supersede this other option?
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Skipsey, no, they are two separate items. So the $16,000 for the new CCTV camera, that's separate than the report on the $5,500 for the ADSB monitoring.
Thank you, Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Venneval.
Thank you. I do also have a question. It's more a interest question regarding the generator for the airport. Because we are also looking at the three-phase power eventually down the road, if we get a grant. I'm just wondering, if there was a power outage, would a generator suffice to charge an airplane? Was my curiosity question.
Mr. Goldfuss.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Vanderbuck, that's a really good question. So if and when we do move forward with a generator, and again, it would be grant dependent, we would spec it out so that it has the capacity to provide power for electric aircraft.
Thank you. And the other question that I had was for Mr. Sales on page 55. On the last line item, East Village Phase 3. Could you just explain or clarify what that would entail exactly?
Yes, thank you. So the East Village Phase 3 basically encompasses Clock Tower Square, but then going down left onto Fur, there's one of the frontages on the undeveloped parcel hasn't been done yet. So this is a project we would be looking to time with the development of that site. So it's in there as a placeholder. We don't actually know when that site is going to develop, so there's likely to be some adjustments once we know more about that particular site. So yeah, Clock Tower Square, down the hill, left, and then on that undeveloped parcel. Thank you.
Councillor Venneval. Councillor Young.
I'd like some clarification when we say grant, dependent on a grant, and then I see it that it's, the project comes up in 2029. Like, for example, at the airport on page, the one where the three-power phasing is going to be looked into in 2029. Are we looking at grants now, though, to be able to do something like that?
Short answer is yes. We do have some conversations with the province that was had, representative from the province as recently as this week. So again, we continue to pursue potential opportunities.
And I'm also in agreement with Councillor Skipsey on the let's get some funding from the skateboard people for the water fountain. I think that's a great idea. And then this is just another vocabulary question. On page 57, what kind of light is a RRFB? Rapid?
Flashing at the rectangular, rapid, there's one there right now, right across the gas station. There's already one put up.
It's called, so it stands for?
Rectangular Rapid Flashing Beacon.
And then on that same page, install a AC powered street light. What's an AC powered street light?
Through the chair, that's a hardwired street light, so that would be powered through BC Hydro, not solar.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Okay,
I
sorry.
just keep going around.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Skipsey. One thing so for page 51, we're talking about all the AC replacement. That's the asbestos, solid asbestos pipes, which are safe, but do have to be replaced. And so I'm just wondering, I saw that the Seacrest replacement, it was 480 meters for 900,000 roughly. And I'm just wondering, like, what's the all-in total of AC water main we have to replace? And is that a reasonable sort of, like, I know this is a really unfair question, and I apologize, but is that a rough ballpark for the cost of about half a kilometer is about $1 million ballpark for replacement? Or is there something special about Seacrest where it's more expensive? So one, how much do we have to do total? And what I'm trying to get is a ballpark of what's the total cost in the long run to do all the AC replacement?
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, through the chair. That's a good question. So the projected estimate for replacing all of our 26 to 27 kilometers of AC water main is about just under $50 million in 2025 dollars. So the prices vary depending on the diameter of the pipe. So they're about from $1,600 to, I think it was $2,250 for the larger pipe. So yeah, it depends on the pipe diameter, but that's about the value of the replacement.
Thanks. And also too, of course, site-specific, different sites have wildly different engineering requirements. So I totally understand if someone says, this is not exactly what Oliver said in this meeting. There's a lot of reasons why. And then also 57, we mentioned that bump out on Memorial and Harlech to slow down the traffic movement down Harlech. Obviously, this is another traffic engineer-related question. I just want to make sure that we've considered it. I think Harlech going into first would be a main route for fire trucks and other first responders. Just want to make sure that we've considered that aspect of things, so that if a fire truck needs to make a turn there or a police car, that's not an issue.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, through the chair. We are going to be creating a design for that, and we will be taking that into consideration for sure. Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of obvious, but I just want to make sure we ask that. I think this is the last time I asked the tedious question about grant funded, what percent, and it's the KSS traffic calming initiative. Do we have an idea of what percentage of that is grant funded or not?
We have applied for grant funding for the KSS, and I believe we have included in the budget, so I'll have to get back to you on that.
No problem
I
at
would
all.
assume about 67% grant funding is assumed, but I'd have to get back to you.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, you're working incredibly hard these days. And I'll pass now, because I think Councillor Skipsey had a question. I don't want her to forget it. Oh, okay. Well, just a couple more things then. One for the generator. So this would be then in lieu of three-phase power at the airport. Is that my understanding that the generator would be used to essentially allow electric planes to recharge? Is that correct? No. If I see a little more detail what's meant by the generator, because I have in my mind a diesel generator to provide backup power. And one of the advantages BC has is we have very clean electricity. And so if we're trying to get the carbon emissions out of our airport, and then we have a diesel generator providing the power which does that, it's sort of we're actually probably making it worse. So I just wanted to double check that.
Mr. Golfers.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, Councillor Harrison, that's a good question. So the intent of a generator is to provide initial backup power to the airport in the event that we lose hydropower. And as I mentioned earlier, what staff would do is they would spec the generator out so that in the case where we lose hydropower, the generator would not only be able to provide power to the airport, which would be the fueling system, the runway lighting, the terminal, it would also be able to provide power for electrification of aircraft.
Thanks. Yeah, I was way off on that, so thanks for clarifying that. And then just two more things. One is page 59, the contingency for Qualicum Commons. And there was a sort of, I guess it was a one-day conference in Nanaimo for all things healthcare. And I did meet the head of the hospital board who sort of pulled me inside and mentioned that the new clinic at Primrose might need some town support. So I just want to check that my understanding is the contingency came from funds that had previously been discussed about for healthcare. And so I just want to make sure if we do decide to provide support for Primrose, is there a way we can make sure that contingency is still in place, basically? And maybe Ms. Varela can provide clarity on that.
Yeah, we're examining that option, and Mr. Sahar was looking at that, and Ms. Varela. So, Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So you can see under note 3 that the matter of the contingency for Qualicum Commons will be brought back to council in 2026 under separate report. It's going to be quite a complex discussion for council, and we do want that to be a standalone report. So pending your further decision making, Your Worship.
That's totally fair, and nothing's been decided yet, so just to be clear on that. But I know we're very tight with money right now because of where we're at, And then the last thing is page 67 was the landscaping on Country Club. So my understanding is there was a bond that the town was holding for the property owner for some unfinished portions of that. And so did that bond then go back to the folks when we bought the who currently has the bond, or is this a totally separate thing? So just because if the town then owns the undeveloped portions, are we using those developments off of that? And then secondly, is it going to be substantially similar to the original plans that people had? Because I know there was a plan back in the day for all the streetscape improvements. I'm just wondering, is this the same plan, like people are going to get what they expected, or are we innovating based on our budget?
Yeah, it's a timing issue. Mr. Sales.
Yes, thank you. So we are holding that funding as cash. We have it in our hand. And the design will likely change from what it was originally intended because that was given to us in 2016 dollars and costs have significantly changed. So we might need to make some adjustments such as considering gravel instead of asphalt or changing tree alignment. And the sign, there was an entry sign that was proposed as a part of that. That would likely be excluded. Thank you.
Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just coming back to Councillor Harrison's earlier question on the KSS traffic calming. That is assumed to be 67% grant funded and with the remainder 33% as a town contribution.
And that's all my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Hare, and everyone else on staff.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey? Councillor Vandervelde? Councillor Young?
I also want to ask about on page 48, where it's $100,000 to upgrade our tech services. Could that be deferred? Like, how many complaints are we getting about accessibility or malfunctioning of being able to access communication better?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Young, that would be a council decision. We put a placeholder in the budget for the replacement of the conference system. Again, it would enhance experience for end users and facilitate, basically reduce the number of technical issues required to be addressed by our IT team. But again, this is not critical and is subject to council decision making.
I'm just kind of nickel and diming here, trying to save, because I'm shocked at the infrastructure, the funding gaps that we have in infrastructure, which would be a priority in what we deal with. You've done a great presentation here. I don't know, have you had time to think about how we can narrow this funding gap that we have, and how much would it increase on our tax rate if we were to try to amortize this funding gap over the next 3 to 5 years and get in a better position?
Mr. Hare.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Young. The presentation, basically we have discussed with Council the asset replacement financing strategy, which has been balanced with affordability for the community. And so the financial plan does include a 1.3% tax increase each year, which would go towards narrowing this gap over time. And as I had mentioned, that's planned over 14 years. It is, of course, up to council discretion if they would wish to accelerate that and be willing to entertain a higher tax increase to narrow that gap in a shorter period of time.
Back to the gallery. Any comments, questions? Yes, come on up, Jay.
Thank you. I'd just like to, first of all, my name is Jay Smith. I'd like to compliment those who put this presentation together. It's very clear and technically proficient. And just as a side to Councillor Young, who inquired about a heritage grant for Tosh, I'm the president of St. Andrews Lodge Historical and Cultural Society, and we did get money from BC Heritage, but the average only 18 to 20,000, and we only got it on the third attempt, and they're a lot of work. So I don't think that'll solve the problems for Tosh. But I would like to follow up on the implications of the last question, which I think is a very important question that Jean Young answered. I mean, analyzing this, you step back, how do we, and I'm looking at slide 19, for example, on the gap between what we need to do over time and what we're able to do, the question of capacity. And how did we get into the situation where we have this issue of capacity, whether it was downsizing of issues or problems from the province to the municipal governments or shortfalls of funding. And it's the question of how long you can defer before great things happen. You can defer your replacing your roof and then you have a catastrophe, and it's a lot more than you expected. So I'm just wondering, to rectifying the fund, we understood from the financial officer that we're adding more to the tax this year, 1.3%. But at some time when your taxes are growing more than 6%, you have a long-term problem. It's a very big problem, and I imagine you get a backlash from ratepayers who don't want to pay that amount of money. So I just see a very large problem that's coming up to us in the next 4 or 5 years that we're going to meet resistance. And this has happened elsewhere, and there's tax rebellions. So I just wonder, in terms of how is council approaching these things, because I just don't think that these are technical issues, they're profound political issues, and I haven't heard that discussion, but I'd like to hear more from the councillors at some point how they're going to address that issue, because you can't escape these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the gallery? Yes, come on up, Marie.
I'm having a hard time. My eyes are still trying to adjust to the font. So my first question is, have we actually done a total analysis of our funding gap? What is the dollar amount we're talking about, say, over the next 10 years to bring our assets back up to the state they should be in?
I think that's a pretty straightforward question. I think Mr. Hare has the answer for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of the analysis of the gap, we are currently, I had a slide here, we currently put about $1.3 million into our asset replacement reserve. And if we were putting the amount specified on the slide, which was, I believe, I'm just going to the slide so I don't give you the wrong number. Bear with me for just a quick sec. So if we should be putting about $3.2 million in today's dollars into the general fund to be able to proactively replace our assets when they come due at the end of their service life.
And that would take something like 25 years to get there?
So the current plan is based on the 1.3%, is to get there in 14 years.
And as I understand it, that 14 years is based on today's costs with no inflation?
It is based on today's dollars.
So realistically, if it's going to take us 14 years to do this, we're not going to get today's costs. So what we're talking about is actually $50 million in today's costs that we need to adjust for future costs and then come up with a strategy to cover it. Am I correct?
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could just have staff and the public refer their discussion points through the chair, so we're not getting into a debate. So through the chair, please, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Mr. Hare.
So, Your Worship, through you, I can't comment to the numbers that have been provided. However, yes, taking into consideration future dollars, I mean, we would narrow that gap because we're talking in today's dollars, so we would have to do an analysis in terms of future dollar, if we were looking at future dollars, how long that would take.
Thank you.
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Worship. So I think it's worth noting that the town of Qualicum Beach is actually in really good shape compared to a lot of other small communities right across the country. We know this is the result of the post-World War II building boom, and that this is not an unusual circumstance that communities find themselves in unless you're a newly built community. So again, I think getting out ahead of this, having council endorse that asset finance replacing strategy, targeting these years. Asset management is something that we can't just do once. So every year, as we upgrade information, master plans, inspections, things like that, this information stays live, staff addresses it, and then they bring it back to council every year. So again, you're well out in front with your financing strategy, you've established your risk tolerance, you're seeing your investments stay very close to their present health score, which is 88%, a very high rate. Council chose that risk tolerance. So again, lots of work going on, and it is a live annual discussion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Just and I know you're very much into accounting, but the 1.3% will increase in dollars as well every year because the base is going to be bigger. So that goes up as well. So that might help alleviate some of the concerns.
Thank you. So when I look just at the water reserve, I understand we have somewhere between 27 and 30 kilometers, the number seems to move, of asbestos piping. I recall a report in November when we were told that much of it needs to be repaired within the next 10 to 15 years because it is at its end of life. So if we're using just the water reserve, the amount that we're replacing at $1,600 a meter is our cost. It's going to take us a long time to replace that, well beyond the expected life of these assets, even at the increased amounts that we're talking today of moving the amount of money going into the water reserve. It seems like it's about around a quarter of what it should be if we want to actually replace these assets before they fail. So enough about water. Next thing I wanted to talk about was that there are other ways of dealing with our gap, and one of them is to stop handing out money to every group that asks us for funding, that we need to learn to say no sometimes so that we can focus on our core infrastructure needs. Other areas that we can look at is looking at some of our assets. For example, the buildings that we're renting out. I think of the Civic Center and the Community Hall. I'm not sure if we as a town, as council, as just members of the public, understand what the actual occupancy rate of those buildings is. We're taking on $590,000 of potential liability for repairs at the Commons, and perhaps some of those tenants could be accommodated in our existing buildings. I think we also need to reconsider tax exemptions. Some are legislated, but most of ours are discretionary, and we don't have to exempt the RDN portion of tax exemptions. Many other municipalities have chosen not to do that, to allow more money going into their core infrastructure. Better use of debt to match useful life of assets to spread out the cost of current and future taxpayers. A lot of the work that we're going to be doing, such as the water reserve repairs, is going to be with assets that have a very long life, and requiring the current tenant, the current owners of property to pay for that very long life is not necessarily the best match. We should be looking to fund some of that through debt and spread that cost out over a longer period of time.
Thank you. You mentioned something about the, taxing the RDN infrastructure.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
So to be a little bit clear about that, what I'm talking about is every time the council adds another property to the tax exempt list, you're not only exempting them from Qualicum Beach property taxes, you're exempting them from the RDN portion, which the town ends up having to pay to the RDN because you've made them completely tax exempt. Okay? And it's a big number. You know, instead of being like 2.5% of our tax base that's being exempted, we're really exempting about 5.5%.
Mr. Hare.
So, Your Worship, thank you for that. So when we provide an exemption, it does extend to all of the other taxing authorities, and yes, the municipality is responsible to pay those taxes. However, it's essentially an exemption Yeah, an exemption basically puts the burden of paying those taxes on the existing taxpayers. So we get levied from the RDN, and that levy has to be paid regardless. But what we cannot do is, I believe there was a mention of not exempting the RDN portion. We cannot not exempt just the RDN portion when we provide a permissive tax exemption. A permissive tax exemption basically exempts all of the taxes.
Okay. The last thing I have is to stop spending on the nice to have new shiny things and focus on getting our core assets. I think it's critical. People really want to have water running every day. You know, whether or not there's a toilet that's a little bit closer than the one in the Civic Center, that can probably wait. But it's important that our waters and sewer actually work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the gallery? And there will be other opportunities. As you know, we have another one in 2 weeks. So perhaps we'll be more prepared for the gallery after having time to read all this, because like I said, we just got this today too, a lot of information. So we're happy to have that discussion. Some good points were raised today. Thank you again, staff, for this very, very good presentation. I have one question. I think it was on page 57, where we talk about a detention pond at Arbutus and Hoy Lake. And I lived there. And I see sometimes massive volumes of water, but it goes right down to the ditch to the Granite Creek. So I'm not sure what a detention pond would do to improve that. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Worship. That's a good question. So that detention pond, you're right, was intended to be constructed on that vacant lot on the northeast corner, or sorry, the southeast corner of Arbutus and Willow. So that is being reviewed in our storm master plan as well. So we should see what the recommendation is for a detention pond on that lot when that storm master plan comes out. I know it's part of that plan.
Thank you, because that's a pretty valuable piece of property. You can put a couple of duplexes or more on that. And like I said, I live there and I watch it because the water is right there, but it runs pretty smooth as long as we keep the ditch itself clear from debris. A couple of years ago, we had an issue where it was so ingrown that the water couldn't flow, and then it spilled over. So every 3 years, we're supposed to do 1/3 of that stretch, so that it helps with the ecosystem. But that was way back the plan. I'm not sure if that's still happening, but we should look into that. Thank you. With that, thank you, staff, council, community, for your time and your input, and we'll see you again on the 28th for the next session. I think I just need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vennewaal, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.